Hello and welcome back to our Pokemon theme park here in Planet Coaster. We're continuing off from last episode where we pretty much finished Pallet Town and now we are starting work on Viridian City. So, the big thing that we're going to be building this episode is the first and I guess technically only Pokemon Center. And this is going to be one of the main anchor points for this section of the park. It's going to be kind of the first building of the new section, so therefore it's going to be pretty much the only thing initially, and until we figure out the other structure it's just going to look a little barren around the area, but I think over time we'll fill that in, flush it out, and of course make it look really nice like we did Pallet Town. So give it a little bit of time and we'll have a nice city-like element added to the park. So I don't know what I'm going to put inside this building yet. It is big enough to have an interior, though definitely smaller than you would otherwise because of the clipping of items through the walls and the ceiling. That's just kind of the nature of Planet Coaster interiors. If you want to do a fancy exterior, generally you're going to have to do a lot of clipping, so therefore you're going to have kind of limitations when it comes to interior structures. Now, there is a problem with this building, and I don't know if you guys just caught it then or not. This is rather sped up, but in copying this pillar from the left side to the right side on the front, what I have done is accidentally shifted the building by like 1/8 of a square, 1/16 of a square. So essentially one of the walls on these pillars are on the wrong side of the grid. And so I'm first noticing it here, putting these windows in, because they're not lighting up 100%, and I don't know why. I'm a little confused by it, but you know, I kind of ignore that and keep pushing through, and I was like, okay, well, maybe it's just me and I'm not spacing them out correctly or what have you. The top of our Pokemon Center here is going to be similar to Professor Oak's house in the sense that it's going to be kind of a barn style roof over the top, and of course in the description down below I'm going to put my reference photo that I used. I believe this is one of the Pokemon Centers kind of shown in the anime rather than so much the video game. The video game, you know, they're usually relatively simple like structures, so therefore I don't really find them to be too interesting to build, so using the anime as a reference I think is a good starting point. The actual frame around the roof, at least on the front and back end, that we're going to be using these white columns that we're going to rotate around to form our arch. This arch is going to be too wide because we need to have a good enough spacer between the front and this little inlet that we're doing with the backs of one of these stone doors here, just to give a nice kind of darker color on top. So here you can see that wall element that's sticking out. That's actually where that grid is off. So we're off by seriously that much, and that's going to create a problem on the back side of the building. And because it's off, it's shifted to like the right just a little bit. What's going to happen when we copy and paste the front section to the back section to try and save some time, it's going to be off on the left on that side. So therefore the whole building is like kind of shifted and split apart, and that's something that's going to take up a lot of my time trying to fix, and I fix it off camera just to try to I guess save you guys the headache of constantly zooming around, shifting everything over. It was kind of a longer process, so there is a time skip in here. Now this arch and main pillar system, you know, everything turned out really well. It's a little bit tall at this point, and I think I do lower it down. I don't know if I do that in the skip or not. I can't quite remember. There are some windows here. I wanted to try and get them to have kind of a pointed and sloped window effect that kind of follows the roof line. Didn't really work out. Here, I decide to use the Pokeball from the Professor Oak's lab that we made. And this is basically how I made it last time. I don't think you guys get to see how the last one was made, as it was made off camera. This is going to be made on camera. It's kind of a long process because I'm having to reference the other one a little bit just so I make sure they're going to be matching. And it's essentially one of these signs that has the kind of, it's almost like a sunset kind of Florida or California-esque theme to it, in my opinion. where it goes from orange to red to yellow, almost like a sunset, and we just encase it using some of these wood blocks, and then encase that again using one of these small windows here, just to give an even more stark kind of frame around it. You know, I really want to try and make it as solid of a circle as possible, so that's why we're doing this. Now the black line in the middle, that's just the side of the window frames, and then the white bottom is just some of the windows turned around, and then the extra little, I guess the stone plaster element kind of melted in there. There you can see lowering the roof line a little bit because it just felt unproportioned. It felt too tall in the center, so it's a good way to just drag a box over it, you slide it down, and you're done with it. Now the roof is going to be the wooden sign planks. One, because it's a very large element, we can save a lot of room on that instead of using the red from, say, what we did with Professor Oak's house. And it just, I wanted a different color red. So this is more of a brown red. It's a little bit darker than the other one. The other one's a little bit more neutral light. It's almost, it's just not quite as stark. And so this one I want to be a little bit more stark with it. Not Tony Stark, but, you know, difference in hue and saturation Stark. But we have our awesome, frame here, and these wooden elements kind of poking out. I'm just doing that to measure everything. Near the end, I do shift them over, so there's a nice clean white line all the way around the roof line. So that ends up getting worked on a little bit. Little juts, little things like this. This is kind of a relatively large building, so there's a lot of little details that you can put into these, but I don't want to put a whole lot in there. So the thing with Pokemon and any anime in general or anything like that is the sense that it's modern-esque, so therefore it's gonna keep it relatively minimal. There are some details, but there's not crazy detailed like, say, a Victorian or a Dutch or anything like that, where there's just all these elements everywhere. There's some layering, but other than that, it's just relatively straightforward and simple. Here you can see the roof not lining up right, and I'm a little confused by it at first, and then I was like, okay, well, I'll figure out what's causing that later. And I just add these trims and things like that, add some interior elements which aren't lining up quite right as well. So at this point I'm like, okay, I need to figure this out. We need to put the back end on, and so we're gonna try and copy this over. Now when I actually just move the items straight back without flipping it around so the exterior is showing, it's lining up correctly, but when I press Z and rotate it 180 degrees, so we have the exterior side showing, it is shifted over. So that's why we have a skip here, and a decent amount of progress has been made, just in general. Just some basic building kind of elements have been added. We're going to add the back facade by just copying the front facade basically around and flipping it. It works out relatively the same. I don't quite know what I want to do with the full back half just yet, as you know, I want to get some other elements around this structure before I start worrying about how it all ties into the landscape. I think it's super important to try and get a good feel of the overall, I guess, the composition of the park in general before you start doing that stuff. Some people are really good and talented in terms of they kind of know what they want in their heads, and they really pre-plan this, and I feel like maybe they just have so much more practice in these type of games than I do, and so they can really just build a structure, surround it full of stuff, and then move on to the next structure. I can't do that. I have to try and reference off of other elements and try and get them to work together. Going to throw in some gardens here, little elements out front just to clean it up a little bit, make it look nice and a little bit more filled in than just a building sitting on a green field. And that'll be the front side. There is a little bit of off-camera stuff we're going to do kind of on the path itself, just to kind of clean up the general line to the structure, but we'll go ahead and go over that in the real time. The speed build section is relatively short today. Again, it's just a single structure. It was complicated, but a lot of it was off camera, so not a super long speed build section. So we'll go ahead and kick it over to real time me. So here we are. This is everything in real time. Here is the Pokemon Center. Here is one of the, I guess, the pathing elements that I added. This is a Great Ball, and it's just embedded into this little fountain here. I want to mess with some of the jets a little bit, try and get some different timings going. But I figured we needed some type of cool water element here. And the blue kind of fountain base reminded me of the color of a Great Ball, so therefore I used that as a base circle. Added the white elements, very similar to what we do to that Pokeball up there. Added some red. Now these red elements are huge. They're giant signs, and this wouldn't work anywhere else except for embedded into the floor or embedded into a giant structure to hide these very, very large elements like this. But because, I can kind of cover it up on the ground relatively easily, I think it turned out relatively well. I'm going to go ahead and pause the game just so you can take it in a little bit here. Now, I might add some more trimming to this fountain. I might make little tiny walls that go up on this. That way it looks like the water is being contained just a little bit better than it is. But I like to turn the main centerpiece of the Pokemon ball into a little fountain jet. So I think that turned out pretty cool. Just a little bit of greenery and some rocks here just to seal the corners up, since it is a round element getting shoved into a triangle. This, just another little pathing decoration, and then as you're coming into this section, you're going to be greeted with some greenery, as you go over here. This is the line and queue entrance to Gyarados, which is a good spot for it. I think this spot turned out relatively nice. It's relatively central to the park itself. Once we get some more buildings in here, it's gonna, I think, keep people flowing in this direction at a good pace. On the inside, we can talk about these arches. These arches are pretty cool. Using these windows as kind of like a bluish element to curve this. On the reference picture in the description, you guys can see me referencing this, though it's in a slightly different spot than it should be. That's okay. The goal isn't to 100% copy something. It's to be inspired by it, use that, and get it close and get it workable to what game you're building in. So if I was building in Minecraft, obviously it would be different still from even this. It would be a lot different than, say, if you were building in Space Engineers or any other creative game where you're building stuff. You generally build things to fit the universe and world that it's in, rather than trying to make an exact copy every time. Because I feel like some things just doesn't translate very well, making an exact copy. I added some benches on the outside. I might make a large single path here instead of these doubles, just to get rid of that little loop. I really want a plaza tool. Just something that I can just plop down large, wide sections of pathing. The inside, let's go ahead and take a look. We do have a lot of space in here to work with. You can see some elements poking through, even up here as well. I had to kind of block that off using a roof element. But there is plenty of room to work with. I could technically make it look a little bit like a Pokemon Center. I can maybe add the desk in here if you guys want, or some shops, stores, souvenir outlet, what have you. I could definitely put some stuff in there, but I want your guys' suggestions on what to do on that, just because I feel, I like to get your guys' feedback and input on structures so that you can be a part of the build itself. I just really like that about YouTube and sharing these things completely like that. Yeah, I think it turned out great. At nighttime, it's pretty cool. All these Pokemon balls actually light up. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up the clock and keep talking as we go over some things. I like the garden elements. Very standard, kind of just large groupings of things in different shapes and different lines. I think that turned out relatively well. And then mirroring it over, of course, always looks nice on a symmetrical building such as this. There's some elements I want to touch up. I don't know what I want to do quite with the sides of the building yet, or with this large flat section here. Maybe if there's trees back here, we might not need to touch the back side. So that's just something to keep in mind. I need to move the roofing over here just a little bit. Now, the ribbing that's caused by arching these planks, I think adds a little bit of character to the roof. You know, it almost looks like these major joints holding the whole thing together. I kind of really liked how that turned out. It's definitely a little bit more unique than I thought it would be. And so, you know, that's just a nice little thing that I enjoyed. Boy, that fountain is just going at it. Just going at it with those jets. What can we look at while we're waiting? It is going to take a little bit for it to be nighttime. I could ride the Gyarados, but that's going to... Nope, not going to ride the Gyarados. Did I touch up on anything else in between episodes? I might have put some more rocks down, like around this bridge area. Put some more shrubbery, just some basic maintenance stuff. But I really wish there was almost like a slider to change the day-night cycle. Since we're in essentially sandbox mode anyways, I wouldn't mind to have some of those really sandbox elements so I can get to these kind of things quicker, and I don't really want to do a skip here. I feel like it's a little unnecessary, and plus I get to talk and hang out with you guys for a little bit longer as we watch over the park and its transition from day-nighttime. Though I'm still having this pathing area just really freak out. A lot of people turn around here. Not many people really come to Gyarados. It's very odd. Only like the back seat gets filled up. It doesn't even come close to how it should be working. I don't know, again, why it's doing that. You know, we only have 400 people in the park, so that could be a reason. Maybe everyone's going here because it's the closest ride. You know, it's just one of those things where I just don't know why it's behaving the way it is. So it's nighttime now. Yay, enough of me rambling. You can see how the Great Ball lights up with the red. I think that's a pretty cool effect to have. I almost kind of wish I could make the center light up red, but we don't have anything round that lights up like that. I could technically maybe put a spotlight in there, but it might be a little too much. Of course, the Pokemon Center Pokeball, the top of that lights up. Same with Professor Oak's Pokeball, that lights up as well. And of course, back there where it says Pallet Town at the entrance, that's of course lit up. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode of Planet Coaster. It was a little bit late, I apologize, but you know, sometimes real life gets in the way. So if you guys enjoyed the episode, feel free to subscribe if you're new. Go ahead and hit that like button. Leave a comment down below on what you guys think. Check out my other videos if you haven't done so already. And until then, I look forward to playing some more Planet Coaster with you guys here soon.